President Biden and First Lady Dr. Jill Biden are going to be leaving the White House, heading here to Chicago for the Democratic convention. The president is, of course, the keynote speaker tonight. That's not the role he originally envisioned, with Dr. Biden introducing him as he passes the torch to Kamala Harris. Joining me now is Elizabeth Alexander, Communications Director to First Lady Dr. Jill Biden and Deputy Assistant to President Biden. And she's going to be traveling with the Bidens to Chicago on Air Force One. I think I can even hear Marine One on the South Lawn, just opposite, behind the White House. So I think you're ready to go. So we're going to do this just a little bit in advance of our show.
Sure.
First,
in announcing... So
well, it's great to see you. This is an historic day, and an historic day for the president's legacy, the First Lady's legacy, and also the historic, gracious decision that he made, a choice of Democratic Party over self. In announcing he was stepping down from the race a month ago, the president said, quote, "I revere the office, but I love my country more." He made a generous decision, doing it for the good of the party. How difficult is it going to be tonight for the president?
Well, I think this is a fulfilling moment for him. His legacy of 50 years of public service is going to be celebrated. I know that the First Lady is very excited to pay tribute to her husband, his character, his empathy, his leadership, and how he has always put country first.
I know Dr. Biden is going to honor the president tonight in Chicago. She's going to be introducing him or doing the first remarks. A source familiar with those remarks says that she will do it, quote, "in a way only a spouse of nearly 50 years can do." So what is her message about her husband?
Well, she'll talk about, as you mentioned, she'll talk about her husband as his wife, as his spouse of almost 50 years. She knows him better than anyone. She knows his character. She knows his capacity for empathy. But she's also seen him on the world stage for those 50 years. So she's seen his accomplishment up front. And so she'll talk about that. And she'll also talk about her full support for Kamala Harris.
Now, there are some sore feelings, not towards Kamala Harris, but towards others in the party. Famously, Dr. Biden once said that Joe doesn't hold grudges, she holds grudges for him. I'm paraphrasing. But so after the president announced he was not running for re-election, Dr. Biden posted a handwritten note on X. And it said, "To those who never wavered, to those who refused to doubt, to those who always believed, my heart is full of gratitude. Thank you for the trust you put in Joe. Now it's time to put that trust in Kamala." So she's his fiercest defender. Tell us more about that. Clearly, there are some hard feelings with some of the people in the party who conveyed to him the message that they thought that he could cost them the House and the Senate, the down ballot races, if he proceeded.
Well, I mean, I think you saw it in the First Lady's own hand. And that's one of the reasons why she decided to do it in her own hand, is so that people knew that it came directly to her. And she wanted to thank those people who had been with them from the beginning. And she also wanted to acknowledge how they might be feeling, but then thank them for the trust and the faith that they had always put in her husband, but that now was the time to put that same trust and that same faith in the vice president. She wanted people to know that that came directly from her. I think everybody saw that as a powerful message from the First Lady and from the president's spouse.
Do you think some of the feelings, the hard feelings, might be patched up?
I don't see any hard feelings. I mean, I think that there's been way overblown in some of the, anonymous sources and campaign books. The vice president would not have been interviewed in the summer of 2020 to be the vice president if there had been any hard feelings. I mean, the Bidens themselves, Joe and Jill Biden, have been in politics for a long, long time. They've been through debates. They've been through primary debates. People compete. People play hard to win. And they all played hard to win. And so all of that, everybody moved past all that by the time the vice president was interviewed the summer of 2020 by the president. And the First Lady and the second gentleman and the vice president and the president, their families have a wonderful relationship, a true friendship. And, politics is politics. That's long blown over.
And what is the top legacy achievement that he's still hoping. He's the president of the United States. I assume the ceasefire and the hostage release is high on his agenda. He's made that clear. Talk to me about that and about the other things he wants to do.
Well, I can't get ahead of the president on the ceasefire negotiations, but what I will say is that I like to take just a step back to where we were 4 years ago when he took office. We were in the midst of a global pandemic not seen in 100 years. We were an economy in free fall. We were 2 weeks past a violent insurrection on the U.S. Capitol. People were dying of COVID by the thousands by the day, daily. Schools were closed. Businesses were closed. And this president led us all out of that chaos with strength, with stability. He restored dignity to the office. He restored our global relations. You know, he faced the first land invasion in Europe since World War II, and he rallied the world to support NATO. And so he has a tremendous legacy, not to mention the fact his historic bipartisan legislation that no one thought could be done in this hyper-divided environment, but Joe Biden did it. And so he has tons of things in his legacy, from his Senate days, from his vice president days to his presidential term, that we will celebrate and continue to celebrate. But the work's not done. You know, the governing doesn't end at the convention. And so for the next 6 months, you're going to see him on the campaign trail, the first lady on the campaign trail, working on what you talked about, you know, peace in the Middle East, you know, getting prices down, fighting corporate greed, and a robust travel schedule leading into January 20th.